Hi everyone, this is Mr. Hall and this is a quick video about blood and blood vessels. So by the end of today's class, you should be able to know the following things. I'm going to go through and talk about the contents of blood, so you should be able to state what is inside that. I'll be describing the function of the different parts of blood, i.e. what they do. I'll describe the different features of arteries, veins, and also capillaries. And then finally, I'll explain how the structure of blood vessel relates to its function. So quite a few things we'll go through today. So first off, what's inside blood? Now, blood is obviously this red liquid that flows inside us as well as other creatures as well. And it contains a number of things. Okay, so first off, it contains red blood cells. Now, the red blood cells are the things that actually make blood red, and they carry oxygen. The chemical that makes blood red, in case you're wondering, is called hemoglobin. All right. There's also white blood cells. Now, white blood cells, I'm just going to write hemoglobin here. Now, white blood cells are much bigger than red blood cells, and they fight disease in the body. And basically, it looks a little bit like this. So you've got these red blood cells here, and they're sort of kind of wafer-shaped or concave. So they kind of look like this if you look at it in a side profile. And they have no nucleus, which is quite interesting. You may know that. And that's to carry as much oxygen as possible inside it. Now, they're quite small in relation to white blood cells. Interestingly, white blood cells do have a nucleus. That's the difference between them. So those are the two things inside blood. You've also got a liquid called plasma. Now, plasma is basically the liquid that carries everything inside it. Okay, and if you were to take out red blood cells and white blood cells and anything else inside blood, what you'd be left with is a yellow liquid, which looks a little bit like this. So this is what blood looks like, or the plasma, if you take all the stuff out of it, just this yellow liquid, so just yellow. And then finally, platelets. Now, platelets are these sort of very small, sort of almost like fragments of cells, and their job is to help sort of form clots or scabs over wounds in case you get cut and blood starts escaping. So those are the contents of blood. In terms of their proportions, it's pretty much like this. So you've got plasma, which makes up a good kind of half chunk of it, lots of red blood cells, and a small proportion of white blood cells, as well as platelets. Okay, so that's the contents of blood. Now, red blood cells carry oxygen, and the plasma in the blood carries these red blood cells and dissolve food to all the cells in the body. Now, the key thing is it's blood and it's also glucose, which is basically the dissolved food, and it can carry other stuff like amino acids and what have you, but the main thing we'll focus on is blood and glucose. Okay. Now, the blood cells get very close to other cells in the body to supply them with the oxygen and glucose for respiration. And hopefully you may remember from previous learning that respiration is oxygen plus glucose react to form carbon dioxide and water. Now, this kind of strange looking diagram is an example of this kind of really tiny blood vessel in your body which passes over loads of cells. This is called a capillary, okay? And this is a very small blood vessel. Okay, now in this diagram, I've got blood flowing from here and exiting here. And these little sort of little cloud things are typical cells, and the little dots inside them are the nuclei that you can find in the cells. So what blood does is that it will flow, and here's my blood traveling. And when it travels, it can get really close to the cells, because the capillary, these mini blood vessels, are absolutely tiny. So the blood can get really close to it and it can do its business. Now, when a red blood cell gets, let's say, to here, it can pass oxygen into that cell, all right? And then you'll also, because you've got plasma flowing through it, you can also have glucose. I'll just represent it as a G going into the cell. You've then got respiration that happens inside the cell, and then the two waste products, which are carbon dioxide and water, they escape. So you've got H2O, which is your water, and you've got carbon dioxide, which is your CO2. And then all that waste product gets taken out of that blood, or taken away from the cells. So basically what you've got is oxygen and glucose going in, and carbon dioxide and water going out. Okay, so that's basically how it works. That's why you have, one of the main reasons why you have blood is so you can transport all of these reactants and all of these products of respiration around the body. Now, there are two main types of blood vessel that you've got in order to make that makes up your circulatory system. You've got arteries, which are here on the left. I'll just put an A, and you've got veins here on the right, which I'll put a V, and you can see structurally they're very different. Now, arteries, they carry blood away from the heart, okay? So if I've got sort of the heart here, okay, there's my heart, and it pumps, and it will pump blood into this artery. Now, they have a smaller lumen. Now, a lumen is just a posh word for the hole, okay? And you can see, I can't quite fit hole in. Let's write it again. And the hole, you can see it's got a smaller radius than the one of the vein, okay? Now, the reason why it's got a smaller lumen is because it's got thicker muscle. You can see the muscle's a lot thicker from the edge down to the edge of the lumen. And the reason why it's thicker is because it's holding blood at a higher pressure from the heart. Now, as I mentioned before, we've got thick outer walls and they're quite elastic. So you've got thicker muscles and elastic fibers. Now, in contrast, here you've got veins. And what's happening with veins is that they take blood to the heart. Now, just to kind of track this path, the heart pumps blood to the artery on the left-hand side. Blood then flows to capillaries where you've got that exchange of stuff from respiration. And then the carbon dioxide and the water they travel in the veins, and then that goes back to the heart, okay? Now, and then, I mean, I'm not going to talk a great deal about the circulatory system, but you've got the lungs, which are quite important here, but I'll talk about that later. Now, veins carry blood to the heart. Now, because the blood isn't at such a high pressure, you don't need such strong muscles, and that's why you've got a much larger lumen, and you've got much thinner walls, okay? They're much, much thinner. So you've got thin layers of elastic muscle. Now, the other thing about arteries that the other thing about veins rather that they've got is that they've got valves, and arteries don't have this, but veins do. And the reason why they have that is to make sure you don't have a backflow of blood. The word backflow is quite a key word, so if you're describing it in an exam, use the word backflow. So veins basically look a little bit like this, okay? So here's my thin wall here, and the red circles represent red blood cells. You might have some white blood cells as well, and so forth. And then this is the valve. Now, the valve can basically close like so. So if this red blood cell was, for some reason, going to try and spin back, it can't. So it will kind of bounce off the valve and go back in, and a similar thing here. All right, so therefore, overall, you've just got one direction that the blood goes. Arteries don't have that and don't need that. And that's it. So I hope the video on blood and blood vessels was useful. Best of luck with your studies on this.